If you think that COVID only impacted those who had underlying causes and as a result either died or contracted long COVID, then maybe think again. There are a lot of people influenced not just by long COVID, not because they didn't survive the whole COVID period, but we are talking about those who are left behind and how this impacted them. And today we have Joe. You've seen her more often.
Hi.
And and Joe is going to share with us a little bit about what life is like ever since she lost Keith, her husband. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, you lost your husband within 2 days, right?
Yes. On the Good Friday went in and he was gone by Easter Sunday. So it was literally 2 days. Yes. He was just gone
Okay.
so quick. Yeah.
So when did he actually get his first symptoms?
The Monday before Good Friday, he had like symptoms of nauseous and he had a bit of a fever and that. So we called like 111, but we have a thing here. And they said they send out an ambulance, obviously, because we couldn't just go to the hospitals because the pandemic, obviously. Um, they came out and they like, done his obs and everything. I said, yeah, I said, his fats are a little bit low, but they're not too bad. It's not overly concerned. Um, so it's just basically they reckon he might have had a bout of food poisoning. But I was like, no, I don't think so. But they said they don't want to take him in because of the virus. So I was like, well, yeah, I'd rather him not go in. So, you know, but they said any concerns, always ring us back, we'll always be there. She said, well, it might take a while, but depending on the severity of it, she said, someone will get at you. I said, oh, okay, thank you. And he was fine on Tuesday. And then the Wednesday, he went to move, but he couldn't. His back, the whole of his back was hurting, and he was having, when he took deep breaths, it was like someone was punching him. So I rang a local doctor up, Anne Marie, who she was his actual doctor, and I explained to her. She went, "Oh, it sounds like he might have a little bout of pneumonia." So what I'll do is I'll do a prescription at the chemist for him to take. She said, I don't want to send him to hospital, she said, because it's such a high risk at the moment. She said, so give him the medication. Obviously, if he doesn't like start feeling better, then just give me a call back. So I said, okay. So I went and got the prescription. He took them the first night. He was still quite rough. Thursday, he was still he wasn't eating. He couldn't keep much down. And the funny thing is, I remember going to the shops with my daughter, and he sent, this is the last ever message I had on my phone. I still have it. And it was so funny because he's spelling, because he was blind as a bat. He was blind in one eye, so he couldn't see properly. And it was, get me ice, please, cream. But it meant to be, get me some ice cream, please, because it was cool and it was good for him. So I remember laughing at the message, going, "Oh God, ice cream! Look, you can't even spell the idiot." And so we got back. He sort of like had a bit of ice cream. So I said, "Try and eat something." I tried to do him some toast, some soup, but he just wasn't. The appetite wasn't there, and he didn't wasn't hungry. So that was another sign. I was a bit worried because he loved his food. And Friday, it was about 12ish, I think, 12 after 12. My tailor went, Dad looks really grey, Mum. I went, yeah, I know, he does look a bit grey, doesn't he? And he had like these little red, like the veins, little red veins. So I was like, yeah, he does. I said to him, I said, you all right? And you know what men are? Men are so stubborn. Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I'm going, no, you're not. I said, you can just about breathe. He said, no, I'm all right. He said, I've got my pumps here. Look, I've got all my. So my tailor said, why don't you go and ask Sean? 2 doors away, my neighbour, she's a nurse. I said, I'll see if she's in. So I've gone out the front and I shouted out to her and like I explained to her, I said, look, I said, he looks really grey. I said, like, the veins look really raised on his cheeks. She went, well, that's not a good sign. She said, that's lack of oxygen. She said, to Taylor, go in, just count his breaths because you don't do normally more than 20 in 60 seconds. She went in, she came out after about 50 seconds. He'd already done about between 60 and 70 breaths. She went, no. She said, you need to call the ambulance. She said, that's not very good. So we called an ambulance and they were there so quick, which I was surprised. Because obviously I told them what my neighbour, the nurse, said, like, explained, like, the breathing. So they had to send them an ambulance out quick. And they came, they'd done all his obs and everything, and it was really low. It was 81, 82, which is supposed to be between 90 and 95. So they said, look, they're going to me, all right, yeah. He's going, oh, they're making a big fuss. There's nothing wrong with me. And I'm thinking, yeah, all right. Because he was one of these, he was always in hospital the last year. So we just knew he'd go in and be back out again because that was him. It was like, it was such a routine for us. And so they've obviously taken him. Obviously, he's got in his chair and that was all said by, I love you, blah, 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 all this. And they took him in and I phoned him that evening because he went in about 2:30, I think he arrived at hospital. I thought I'd give him a few hours to settle in because I need to sort him out because obviously we weren't allowed down there due to COVID reasons. I spoke to one doctor in the evening. She was like, yeah, he's fine. He's managed to eat some sandwich. He's had a cup of tea. He's had to come up to 91, so it's looking quite promising, but we're going to keep him in overnight, she said, because we've got like wards that are fine for like normal patients. She said, we like to keep him in just to keep a check because where he sats a lot up and down. She said he is a bit gasping for a bit of oxygen, so we like to keep him on the machine. I went, okay. Then she said, we've got a nurse coming in tomorrow. She said, they'll give you a ring between 9 and 10 in the morning. So I went, okay, that's fine. So we was like, we was all like optimistic. Yeah, he's going to come home. He always does, I think of it. Then they rung up in the morning. Said, yeah. They said, he's not doing too bad. She said, what we're going to do, we're going to do an X-ray this afternoon. She said, so ring back tonight between 7 and 8 because that'd be a shift over. They swap over shifts with the nurses. She said, and then someone will talk to you and let you know, how he is and whatever. She said, and hopefully he'll be home like over the weekend, like Sunday. I was like, oh, that sounds promising. So we was all like, yeah, sounds really good. And then 2:30 that afternoon, the phone rang again, and it was the hospital. And they said, can I speak to Joanna Parker? And I knew, I had that feeling straight away that something weren't right. And she said, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do for your husband, I'm afraid. And I'm thinking, what? Sorry? What do you mean there's nothing you can do? Well, his lungs were completely covered. She said it's just affected his lungs, that they're just impairable. And unfortunately, they'd put a rule in the time when he was in there, no resuscitation, do not resus. They weren't allowed to resus anybody, which I thought was quite bad because that's not their decision to make. That should have been ours. Because at the end of the day, you should still try and fight to bring someone back, But we was just told no resuscitation, and there's nothing I could have done because it was a government thing, And that's when she said, well, you can come down and see him because he lived with you, but you're only allowed like between 10 and 20 minutes. And I said, what about my children? She said, no. I said, yeah, but they're adults. They're not back. She went, no. She said, unfortunately, you can't. She said, only you can come down. She said, and that's it. No one else will be allowed in there, which was hard because I had to sit there and tell my kids they couldn't go. that was the hardest thing. And obviously my girl said, "Oh, we're going to come with you. You're not going on your own. You're not driving on your own," because I was in such a state. And so they came with me in the car, and they sat in the car while I went in, and it was just the most daunting thing ever walking in. I mean, when you watch movies, you think, that's never going to happen. It was the most horriblest memory of a hospital ever. It was silent. When I mean silent, now normally hospitals, I don't know what they're like in your country, but here you can never move. It's just like constantly on the go, accident, emergency, everything's like, flowing. And it was just completely dead. It was just, there was a security guard, a couple of security guards, two women at a desk because you weren't allowed to walk in. You had to go through one door, which it's normally all open. Everything was shut, so you had to go in, give your name, who you're seeing, blah blah blah, this and that. And then they took me to his ward, and oh my god, it was just the most horriblest thing because all you could hear was beep 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 beep. That's all you heard was machines, nothing else. It was just complete silence and breathing machines. That's all you could hear, you know. And then they took me to his room, which was about 4 rooms down, and there was 3 other men on life support. But it was weird because it's like there was nothing wrong with him, which was really strange because obviously where he'd had the oxygen, it makes you look like you're glowing. And he looked the most healthiest he had looked in years. I'm looking at him thinking, you're not going anywhere. What are they telling me you're dying? Look at you. You look so bleeding healthy. How can you be ready to go? There's no way. And obviously I was speaking to him because obviously he knew and I knew, but at the time I didn't know he knew. So I'm trying to hold it together. I'm just trying not, sort of, what's it? And he's like trying to make little jokes like he does because that was his sense of humour. And obviously he didn't want me to know. He probably thought that I didn't know. So he's trying to be strong and I'm trying to be strong for him. So it's like tit for tat sort of thing. And obviously it was like it went so quick, which he does. We was just talking, and he was trying his hardest to talk when he could. And then obviously it was the nurse come in and she was speaking to me. And because obviously I couldn't sit next to him, I couldn't kiss him, I couldn't do anything like that. The only thing I could do was hold his hand with a glove on because obviously I had to be covered from head to foot in stuff because of the COVID, obviously, because I'm walking into a room where it's full of COVID people, you know what I mean? So I was risking it anyway, to be fair, going in there, but I didn't care because I wanted to see him. And then obviously I had time to leave, and that's the most hardest bit because, as I said, when I came out, they had in their ward, they had like the door, and there was a window on each side, and I was taking off all my stuff that I had on, the gloves, and I looked up, and obviously his bed was in that window, and he looked straight at me, and I could see one teardrop down his eyes, and that's it. And then I knew that was the last I was going to see him, and he obviously knew it was to see me as well, because I found out that he'd actually, when the nurse said to him, told him, like, do you want your wife to come up? He said, no, I don't want her to see me like this. He didn't want me to go, and I didn't find that out until after. But I'm glad I did because, that was for my choice to choose, and I think that's why they let me choose if I wanted to go or not. So, yeah, and it was that was the most hardest thing, to walk away knowing that was it. Like it could be any minute, any day, because they give you a timeline, but you don't know how strong a person is. Some people can last like bloody weeks, can't they? You know what I mean? Excuse my French, they can last weeks with things like this, you know. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe like, you know, in a couple of days' time, so oh, no, you know, he's actually pulling through, you know. And I'm thinking, yeah, maybe that'll happen, you know, because he's strong as not. He ain't going to be going anywhere. That's what I kept saying to myself, because he was in out of hospital so many times. Do you know what I mean? We always used to say you had about 30 lives. You're a cat, because cats have 9 lives, and you've got more than 9 lives, you know. And we used to like say that about him, and it was just, you know, it's just unbearable to think that how many hours, what time I come out of there was probably about 4, half 4, so half 5, half 6, or 7, half 8, half 9. So 12 hours, exactly 12 and a half hours later, he's gone. 4 o'clock, Easter Sunday morning, he passed away. I got the phone call at 4:30 to tell us that he'd gone. And it was just like, I couldn't register it. It was like, no, I'm not listening to this. It's not, you know, and obviously the kids were down, and it was just like, we was all like, well, you know, in disbelief. There's no way that he's not gone. You don't register it, and it's really, really strange. And then I sat back and I thought, my God, that nurse, how many people has she had to ring round? What a job to tell people that their loved ones are gone. Can you imagine how many phone calls that person was making a day? I'm like, how? How did they get through that, you know? It's like, oh my God, it's just literally unbelievable, you know, the things that went through my head.
That
And
nurse
yeah,
gives people a chance to actually say goodbye.
yeah, and
So as hard as
that
it
was,
is, it's
yeah,
also very rewarding.
yeah, because like with the funeral, obviously you're never prepared for that, are you? We didn't have insurance. Oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to bury my husband? I'm thinking, oh dear, what are we going to do? And I said to my kid, I said, I don't know what we're going to do. She said, well, we'll just have to rally around family, Mum. She said, I'm sure they'll help. And then my friend said to me, she said, why don't you get your daughter to set up a GoFundMe page, explain why, you know, what you're doing is for, that you lost your husband to COVID. I went, oh, I can't do that. I said, I feel like I'm begging. She went, no, you're not begging. It's to give your husband a send off that he deserves. She said, people will understand that. And then I sort of come around to the idea, and then like my kids saying, it will help, you know. And I'm thinking, well, no one's going to donate, you know what I mean? And so she set it up, and people were donating left, right, and centre. And we had, because because I put in here, was a big England rugby fan. He loved rugby. Well, I had my daughter Taylor had the phone call from the manager of the England rugby team. His team that he supported, Harlequins, they contacted us. Well, they put money into it and things like that. And it was so nice to see, because as you see my story that I shared, you could see that I had over 1.7k shares. That's just shares. People were sharing my page. So obviously it's gone viral, because he was in the newspaper and everything, because there was only 7 people in England that died on Easter Sunday, and he was one of them. So it became a big thing because of the being Easter Sunday, you know. It was and we didn't done like, there was interviews left, right, and centre. Oh my God, we was in papers. We was on the internet all over the world. We was having people donating from America, from other countries, European countries. Like people were donating, and you know, and without them, I would never have. I don't know how I would have done it, you know, because you're put in that position that, oh my God, someone's so suddenly died, because we never knew that was going to happen. We didn't know we was going to get a pandemic. And then you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And I can imagine there was plenty of other families like that, because you had families a lot, just not one, but people were losing 2, 3 family members at a time. Because I remember reading in our local hospital, someone we knew that was a nurse, there was a young Indian girl in there, and she's the only one survived. She was only 12. A complete family of 7 all died. So you can imagine like what that must have been for a 12-year-old losing a complete family, you know. And you start hearing more and more sort, and it's oh my, you know, and it is, because it leaves you in a situation where, oh my God, what do I do? Because obviously I was his carer, so I wasn't working. So that all stopped immediately, because they don't give you no extra. That as soon as that person dies, that money, that stopped, cut. If you'd used any, you'd have to pay that back. And because they paid me 2 weeks, because he was paid a month's money 2 days before he died, I had to pay all that back apart from the 2 days, because he had died. And it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, you know. And obviously being in lockdown, so trying to get hold of the people, because I obviously need money to live. I had to go without money for 12 weeks.
So how did
Luckily,
you?
because of the GoFundMe, I had £1,000 left over, and we had to survive on that. Because, you know, otherwise, luckily, I mean, I had my daughter there and her partner, so they helped me anyway. Do you know what I mean? They helped to get food and stuff like that, you know. So we was like, you know, trying to, but it was hard. It was so hard because nobody could work, nobody had money. It was awful, absolutely awful time. You know, it was like, oh my God. And obviously because he worked years ago, he had a state pension, but I had to wait, what, 8 months to get that, you know, and that's only what, £80 a month. What are you supposed to do with that? You know what I mean?
So you basically were in luck with the GoFundMe
yeah,
race.
yeah. And considering this was another frustrating part, like funeral, why should we have had to pay for a full funeral when no one was allowed to be there?
Yeah, that's
so you
true.
think these funeral companies, mate, they're the only people that didn't suffer, because you think how much money they were making a day from all these bodies.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands. But luckily, my one, it was a local one. They were amazing people. They were so lovely, because wherever you went, all these big like funeral places and that, you weren't allowed to see the body. They wasn't opening the caskets. Nothing. You couldn't choose your coffin. You wasn't allowed to do this. You wasn't allowed to have cars. You had to take your own transport. But the one man who done Keith, bless them, they were so lovely. They came round, was sitting there, and like I explained to us. She said, "Oh, you got?" I said, "Yeah." I said, we've got a granddaughter. So she's 11 months old, and you know, I was talking about Ellen, and like Taylor, Ellen was saying her own bits, and Taylor as well was talking to him and everything. And she said, like, look, we don't normally do this. She said, but I've got gold lettering. She said, what I'm going to do, she said, I'm going to put dad at the end, I'm going to put husband on the side, and granddad on the other side. I went, oh, that would be amazing if you can do that. She said, I know it's hard because your kids have not, they couldn't say goodbye while he was alive. She said, and that's what we can offer, just to give that bit more, you know, comfort. And obviously, you weren't supposed to give them clothes to put on them. nothing. None of them were doing. But we could, so which was nice as well. And we had all letters and stuff, photos. We had loads of stuff to put in there. So she went back to the place, and then she rang me up an hour later. She said, right, she said, my husband's going to go and pick your husband up tomorrow. She said, he's at Corbett's Tay because I had to make a makeshift mortuary because the hospitals were so covered they couldn't put all the bodies there. And she said, when he brings him back, she said, what he's going to do, because he'd been there for 2 weeks. And she said, what he's going to do, she said, I'm going to bring him back. She said, he's going to embalm him. If he looks fine, she said, then we'll give you a ring and we'll let you come see him and the kids. She said, I'm not promising anything. She said, because it might not work. She said, but I said to her, but isn't the disease on the body? She went, no, after once you're dead, 72 hours later, the disease is out of the body. It's gone. Unless you start cutting them open and then touching things, then obviously, yeah. But when the body's like laying there all intact, she said, no, you won't get nothing. After 72 hours, it's dead. It's like a dead virus. I went, oh, okay then. So all these people saying that they couldn't do this and let people view it was utter rubbish. And then she rang me up the next day and she said, you and your kids can come down and see your husband today. She said, you can spend all day there as long as you like. She said, but it'll have to be today, she said, because he's come up with a little black dot, obviously because the body starts going discolour. Like she said, the rest of his body is, but obviously he's going to be covered, but his face is fine. She said, so if you want to cut, I said, oh, that'd be amazing. And we did, and we took flowers. We took baby grow wrapped up with a little bow of violets, put in there with him. Photos of me, the kids, Violet, flowers, you know, all things like that. We put them all, they let us put them all in with him and everything. And that was so nice because it was good for the kids, because especially Ellen, because she didn't get to say goodbye properly. I mean, it was difficult because obviously it didn't really look like, or it looked like him, but it wasn't. It didn't. It looked totally different because you do, didn't you, when you're embalmed? His body's her. Like, you look so young, and he looked like his uncle. And Ellen was, because I said to her, I said, if you're worried, you just put your head in if you don't like it. But she was fine. She was like, it's like really weird. It's a weird experience, especially when it's your first time, which for her it was.
And she was only 15 back then.
Yeah, and she was 15 years old at the time, so it's a lot to deal with. But we were sitting in there, we was laughing, joking, then we was crying, and we was crying happy tears. You know what I mean? We was talking about saying, oh my God, he's probably laying here looking at us and thinking, what are you doing, you lot? You know, and things. We was just like going over memories, you know, which was quite nice. My son, Hades, he didn't go because he can't deal with things like that. It was too much for him. But me, Ellen, Taylor went. And it was nice because they were so lovely. And we even had a car for the funeral as well, which they didn't have to. So I didn't pay for no embalming. I didn't pay for the car. They were just amazing, absolutely amazing. They were really lovely people and they really helped out. And I thought, I couldn't have wished for a better funeral service because I went to one, first of all, couldn't have a embalming, couldn't take nothing, couldn't give him anything to put in with him. Coffin would be closed, you can't do this, you couldn't do that. And it was like, oh my God, this is just awful. And then 2 weeks after his funeral, that's when they started letting people go to the funerals. And I was like, and they started recording it. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't get it recorded. I was so gutted. Like, it would have been so nice to have been able to, family and friends, to watch it.
Yeah. They really needed to reinvent the whole thing when it came to funerals. I had 2 funerals during that period. So one was like half a year later. Oh, it was in June actually of that year. And so we were allowed to go there, but only a few at a time. And like you said, we were able to decorate the coffin. But there was only a small amount of people allowed. So then later on they started doing the filming. I remember that. So there was someone else, Hugh. Well, my mom passed away, of course, a year
Yeah,
later
same
after
as
your
me, my
husband.
cousin.
Yeah, and
Like, we was
she,
allowed to go to that. My friend's dad died as well, and we went to
yeah.
that funeral, and
So
that was
we were
like a couple of
allowed
months.
to dress up the coffin. Well, actually, they did it for us. We gave the stuff, and so they told us back then. I think 30 or 50 were allowed because it was a big church.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the trial and error. And but going back to the first thing you said, so within a week, it started on Monday and he was gone on
Yeah.
a Sunday within a
Yeah.
week. And that's what a lot of people
Yep.
do not realize. Then, of
Mhm.
course, because you didn't expect it, and how do you get the money for the funeral? Unless, of course, you have insurance. But
Yeah.
it still was unexpected. And what strikes me in the whole story is where you weren't able to say goodbye at the hospital, you were allowed to say goodbye at the funeral home. So that's a good
Mm,
thing. And it's
yeah.
true what you said. There was no cake, there was no coffee, all those
No, there was
things.
nothing, and it didn't feel like a funeral
Yeah,
because it was just me, my kids,
yeah,
his cousin, her husband, her mum, and our friend who's a paramedic. She was on the phone with us, and it's Taylor's best friend, Sarah. She came in her uniform and everything. That was it.
yeah,
I couldn't see and that was the hardest as well because when he passed away, I couldn't have no family members, no
yeah,
one, and that was so painful because I was my phone and video call was on constantly 24/7 because the family trying to talk and you know obviously because I couldn't be there and it was just horrible, It's like, I mean, I had people dropping things off round. They come to the end of the gate and they bring stuff round. Like my friend Angela, bless her, she's Italian. She made us two massive lasagnas for the day of the funeral. She said, "There you go," and she gave us a couple of bottles of wine. And that's what we did. We came back, just me and my kids, had some lasagna, glass of wine. That was it. And it just did not feel I didn't feel like a funeral. It's
no,
just,
no.
you know,
It brings me back to that moment that my mom passed away, which of course was in February in 2021. So, well, a year on the way of COVID.
mm,
And I wanted to hug my sister, and I looked at her, and I wanted to hug my brother. But the thing was, because my brother and I were basically caretakers, and we couldn't avoid one another when we were there. So one day a week, we would be there together, and on
yeah,
other days I would go there like 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more. Sometimes I would be there like 5 days a week. And it was hard to, I mean, we each had our own bubble, but we couldn't avoid it. So at some point we were like, yeah, basically we're part of the same bubble whenever we are here. And then when my mom passed away, then of course then all of a sudden that bubble was restored, and I was like, hey, I've been close to you because we couldn't avoid it, because my mom basically needed help, and now you're here with your wife and your kids, and all of a sudden you can't hug me anymore. Well, she
yeah,
just passed away. What? So fortunately he did. My sister didn't, which was not really a surprise. She's always a little distant, and she was
mm,
careful, which I think is a good thing. And I didn't see her that much during that the time that my mom wasn't doing well. And of course, well, like you said, there was COVID, so you couldn't look up and see other people. It was kind of hard. So it was, yeah, the whole funeral thing. We were in luck that it was in a big church, so a lot of people actually attended. Also, people, neighbors, friends of mine, and quite a lot. But afterwards, it was just weird. We went to the burial ground, and then we would stand on one side, and there were a couple of people who would stand on the other side, and that was about it.
Yeah.
and nothing else. So yeah, I do remember that, but especially the
Yeah.
comfort,
See,
the
yeah.
saying, "Hey, let's hug and just tell
We
how we
wasn't
feel."
allowed a
It couldn't be
burial.
done.
Yeah. See, we wasn't allowed burials. Everybody that died from
Yeah.
COVID had to be cremated
Yeah.
over
But of
here.
course, the good thing for us was my mom didn't die of COVID. My mom, of course, died of old age. So
Mm.
it's still a weird time when everything happened because, of clocks when you had to be inside, when you couldn't go out anymore, the curfew. But apart from that, this was expected. So my mom already talked for years about when I pass away, please go do this, that, and the other. And she had a big folder, like, okay, this is what you need to arrange when something happens. And that's the total opposite of what happened to you because you were his caretaker, you got money to take care of him. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, you didn't have any income anymore,
No.
and but also those little things, what to do, and the things that he actually did for you.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked at some point about insurance and all that stuff. He
Yeah.
was going to take care of it, and in the middle of the process it just
Just went.
stopped.
Yeah. It just never got around doing it, and obviously it was too late, and it was just like
Yeah, so what you're talking about is
realization.
that at
Yeah.
someday you got to realize
Mm.
that you didn't have insurance when it was too late and actually something
Yeah.
happened. So your house basically flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't even go there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not
It
going to go there.
flooded, and
but the
like,
mere fact that it was, people don't realize that when something like that happens, you stop sleeping. You basically are in survival mode,
yeah.
and the common day-to-day things, they just stop. You are basically surviving. I mean, you're surviving on where do I get money.
Yep.
Fortunately, you had some money because of the donations, so that's a good
Mm.
thing, but that doesn't last forever.
No, it didn't.
So but those, and that's, I think, the huge difference between someone dying suddenly, especially within a week,
Yeah.
and when you have the time to prepare and to talk about things, go through things. And if there's one thing people could take away from this, there are still people dying, unexpectedly from one day to the next.
Yeah.
Not because of COVID, but because of other reasons, and maybe some of COVID still too. I mean, but if there's one thing people can hopefully take away is be prepared. Make sure that you've said everything you want to say, but also that if the other partner is no longer around, can you support yourself? What do you need to do?
Yeah.
Is there any insurance in place? How do you get your money? What do you need to do? So all those things which are normally divided between partners, it's important that you know how
Yeah.
to deal with this.
Yeah. It does get to a point where, I mean, now it's made me realise, thinking, oh my God, if only we had done that, and I probably wouldn't have been in the situation I was in at the time and everything. And it's got even harder because obviously the after effects mentally, it drained me, mentally tortured me. I've been having anxiety, depression, obviously since he passed, and I had it previously with traumas, but this was such a trauma that it affected me mentally so bad. Um, and I couldn't go to work. I wasn't mentally prepared to go to work, because my health just started getting bad because I had COVID as well. Um, Obviously, my young daughter, she suffered severely, so I had to take care of her as well. And watching your own child suffer, it's not nice, you know what I mean? Because she was only 15 at the time, and watching her suffer, and and things like that. And it just literally mentally drains you, and, physically and mentally. And obviously, then, as you say, things go wrong in the house. What do? It's like, oh my God, because the government don't care. They're not going to help. It's not their problem. It's your problem, and lucky for me, someone was helping out, which I'm so grateful for, because without them, I don't know where I'd be or what I'd be doing. Um, but there's many out there who haven't had that chance of somebody's help. How are they coping? It's and look at the amount of people that are homeless now because they lost jobs, couldn't afford rent, out on the streets. And that's, I always had that hanging over my head, thinking, oh my God, what if I lose my house? What if I'm kicked out? Especially now because Ellen's like 18. So because she's now 18, they'd be like, well, no, you just go on the streets, don't care, not interested. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's things like that, and it does affect you mentally. It really does affect you mentally. And I'm just not mentally prepared to go to work yet. I just really am not. I would not be able to hold a job down. And a lot of
Yeah, I think
people are like,
you're
yeah,
still
but
struggling with having to prove that you actually can work, and then when you've done it,
mm,
then like 3 to 6 months later,
yeah,
again you have to go through the process. But something else you said too. I mean, we talked about the whole insurance thing and all those things, but those bills that didn't get paid. I
yeah,
mean, I think for a year or 2 years later, you still had
yeah,
skeletons coming out of the
yeah,
closet because he was supposed to pay something
yeah. And
and you
obviously
didn't
where he
know.
died, and yeah,
And
and
then
then I
I
had
think
bailiffs.
also it had to do with the
Yeah,
name
yeah,
on the invoices
yeah.
because it was addressed to him, so you didn't see it, but you did get
No,
the people collecting it at the door.
and it's absolutely disgusting because I think if somebody dies, all their debts should go with them.
Yeah.
It should be buried with them. It shouldn't be left to that other person because we were married. If we weren't married, it wouldn't have affected me.
Yeah, but
They wouldn't have been
here's the
able to.
cruel thing: you were married, but
Mm,
as far as I can recall, you also told me that some things were addressed to him, some
yeah,
invoices, but they didn't send them to you, and you didn't
no,
get them.
no.
So
So it
you,
was
if
like,
you
yeah,
wanted to, you couldn't have paid for him, and then you got
hmm,
fined because he didn't pay
yeah,
them because he was passed. He had passed on. But
yeah,
still, they held you responsible, even though they
yeah.
didn't send it here. And that's something I think a lot of people are not aware of, that there it doesn't stop the moment that
No,
he's
it
passing
doesn't.
on.
No,
You are
no.
still, and that's what you just said, you're still
Mm.
suffering from the consequence because you only sleep like 3 hours a night.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
a little bit better though since you've had trauma therapy, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, since I've been having obviously trauma therapy with you, lovely lady Lexi, helping me for all my traumas, talking about things, and it's getting a lot more. I'm starting to learn to sort of deal with it more and speak about it more, and whereas before I was just like in such a bad rut, like it was horrible. And I think if I'd hate to think where I'd be now if I didn't have all that with you,
Yeah, that's
because
true.
it was getting to a point where I was getting worse and worse and worse. It was just like burying, as I say, we say over here, like burying my head in the sand. You
Yeah.
know,
So if we just
and
fast forward for a sec, Um, like I lost my mom a year later, so did you.
mm,
Um, I was lucky or fortunate enough to live close by. Um, of course, it had the downside because I was the caretaker basically. So
yeah,
I would get a call at 7 in the morning from the police that I needed to go over there to make sure that they could go into the house.
Yeah.
But the good thing, of course, was when she passed away, even though I wasn't there, um, that's one of those things that probably had to happen, because if I had been there, I would have dragged her to the hospital, and we all know what it was like
Yeah.
back then. So it's a good thing we didn't know, and so she basically she had a long sleep, as she said, as they said it. Passing away can take almost a day, but
Yeah.
I was able to bathe her, to dress her, to pick things, to sort things out. Um, but you were not allowed, even though you knew your mom was in her final stages of life. You were not
Yeah.
allowed to travel over there because she was living in a different country.
Yeah. She was living in Belgium, and obviously she was given like amount of days because she had cancer, and obviously it was near my birthday as well. But I'd just literally gotten over COVID previously a week before, that I was told that she didn't have long left. And because at that time they were starting to lift, certain countries were lifting off restrictions. So I rang up the passport and said, look, can I get an emergency? I said, look, my mum's in Belgium. She's like suffering, blah, blah, blah. They went, yeah, okay. Have you had your vaccines? I said, yeah. Have you had COVID? I said, yeah. They said, when was the last time you had it? I said, it was over like a week and a half. And they went, you won't be able to do it. They won't let you travel. And I went, but I'm over it. No, because in Belgium it was still restricted and I couldn't. And then obviously I couldn't see my mum either in the last few days of her life, which was really hard. I managed to get like a video call to see her, which was special because it was on my birthday. And she literally opened her eyes and whispered, like, mouthed, I love you. She could hear me talk. And I realised as well she didn't take any morphine. 2 days before my birthday, they wanted to start her, and she said no, even though she was in pain. But it's because she didn't want to die on my birthday. And the next morning, she took the morphine. 2 days later, she passed. So if
Yeah,
she'd taken the morphine when they did, she would have passed on my birthday. But
yeah,
I think she didn't want to.
yeah. And I remember that you said, no one is allowed in the hospital, and I won't be able to
Mm,
video call her anymore, and then I said, I need to try, and
yeah.
then all
And
of a
then I
sudden you
did,
could.
yeah. Yeah. And it was just like, it was the best birthday gift ever, that video,
Yeah.
seeing her.
So
And
that funeral, you did have you could watch along. So we were, of course, 2 years down the line by then
yeah,
with
yeah, I
COVID.
could
So
watch
still
it.
restrictions, but yeah,
Because I asked them, I said, look, can you get them to stream it? And they said they'll ask. And they said, yeah, because I was over here. They said, yeah, they'll stream it for me. And I was really pleased with that because, even though I weren't there, I felt like I was a part of it. I could watch it and everything, of all the memories and the photos of me when I was young with my mum and seeing all them on there. It was quite special. And then a week later, they restricted the thing. So I could have gone, if it had been a week later, the funeral, I would have
yeah,
been able to go.
yeah,
So it was,
yeah.
yeah,
If you
so that was
just look
hard.
at how everything changed during those 3 years, basically it's
Mm.
been 3 years.
I lost so many family members from the March, the year of COVID. It was just constant people I've lost in my family.
Yeah,
It first started off with my cousin's young boy. He was only 20, he died of cot death. That was in the end of March. Then 3 days before hubby died, my uncle died in a care home. And then obviously Keith. Then my cousin,
Hmm.
he died of COVID in November. Then in the March that year, the following year, my cousin was found murdered in town. Then it was like another friend of mine lost his life to cancer. Then obviously my mum, and it was just constantly one after the other. It's
Yeah.
just, just never stops,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, this is
That's.
so much trauma. Like, this is why Ellen suffered a lot, because we lost so many family members, and she was
Mhm.
so young. It's bad enough for adults to deal with it when you've got a child, and
But
it
going
still
back to
become
you,
harder.
so we're, like I said, we're 3 years down the line, and well, we know that you had a lot to deal with mentally, but as a result, also physically, because you couldn't sleep,
Mm,
worrying about money, what's going to happen next,
yeah,
like the skeletons coming out of the closet. But as a result, also because you couldn't get out that much anymore, so you couldn't
no,
move, you couldn't
couldn't
exercise.
move. Yeah,
So in the last year, you actually got it pretty bad yourself, right? When it
yeah,
comes to your health.
yeah. Because I
So,
mean, I did well, didn't I, in Chicago when we went to Chicago?
mhm.
I lost so
Yeah,
much
that was so
weight.
funny.
Yeah,
I literally said to you, "Oh, please mind that I can't walk very, very, very much." Then we had to get you those boots, the high ones
yeah,
that you could
yeah,
easily walk, which you
yeah.
did. But yeah, you,
But
you you did good. But still, you are suffering from the after effects,
yeah,
because you had COVID prior to it when your mom passed away.
yeah.
And then, of course, when we returned from Chicago, you got ill, not with COVID,
No, but I was
but
really ill. Oh yeah,
yeah. And that's the whole thing. I still believe that, because you did a lot better when we were there for the 4 weeks. And then when you got back, I do believe you got a setback because you were
yeah,
alone again.
yeah. I think a lot of it was as well because where we done so much every day, didn't we? We was doing things and it was enjoying it. We was doing so much walking, exercising, and then you come back and it's like reality again. It's like, oh God, back to
Yeah.
reality again. And it's like, well, it's like you're up here and all of a sudden it's gone woof again. It's like, I don't like that feeling. It's like, oh, you know. And then obviously I got ill. I was so rough. Then I had that for about 4 or 5 weeks. Then 2 weeks after that, I got ill again, didn't I? I kept getting ill. And it was like, oh my God, when is this ever going to stop? And it's just, I don't know, my health has just gone down and down and down. And obviously now I have health issues, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol. I need to lose weight drastically because high cholesterol, that's heading towards a heart attack. And which is what I do not wish to have. I need to really sort myself out and like, because otherwise they'll end up burying me in the next year or so if I carry on. And
Yeah.
I can't
That's
let that
going to be
happen.
too hard on your children.
Yeah, I need to be fit and healthy. I know I'm never going to get as healthy and fit as I was when I was like 20, 30, but I can lose the weight. So my BMI goes back down, my cholesterol goes back down, the diabetes disappears.
Yeah. And
I've got all that chance.
I don't think people realize that this basically, I mean, the chance that this would have happened would be so much
Mm,
slimmer if
yeah.
he was still around.
Oh
And
yeah, I would
of
never have
course,
gone like that. Yeah.
gyms were closed and all that stuff, but
And I started
especially,
smoking when he passed. I went
Yeah.
back to smoking, didn't I? So that didn't help.
Hmm.
And obviously, I gave up when we went to Chicago.
Yeah.
See, it was fine when I was out there because we were busy. But as soon as I come back, you start picking
Yeah.
because I was used to sitting there smoking, like, having a cigarette
Yeah.
and that didn't help either with the weight issues. And obviously, I have got underactive thyroid as well, so that's one of the reasons why I need to keep my weight under control as well, because that can cause a lot of issues. So
But it's
you're going to help
I
me?
don't. Yeah, I'm going to help you. I told you, but it's a lot. It's something that people don't realize that a lot of people said about even during COVID. I mean, there were those people who said COVID doesn't exist, and why do we have to keep our distance? There were so many people who were all against. They felt
Yeah,
they were locked up, couldn't do anything fun anymore, and of course for the kids going to school, they didn't see their friends, so it was kind of hard, not being able to
yeah,
go anywhere. But I don't think people realize why this was actually happening, but also what I mean, for most people, it's like, yeah, COVID is over and done with, which, by the way, isn't
yeah,
true. We just have lifted all regulations, and because
yeah,
the effects are not that bad anymore. But apart from that, there is still this group of people who are suffering from long COVID, or like you, who are widows.
mm,
And of course, there are also men who lost their wives, but they don't realize the impact it has when, well, basically, we talked about 7 days, but we also talked about 2 days. So from the moment that he went into the hospital, you only had 2 days, and then he was gone, and nothing prepares you for life
mm,
after someone passes away. I mean, it's hard enough
yeah.
normally as it is.
Normally, yeah, that's the thing. Like, it wasn't like a normal, not so much normal death, but when you have like heart attacks, cancer, you're more aware,
Yeah,
you're more
usually
prepared, so
you
you
are. Yeah,
know what, yeah, you normally sort of, obviously you do get the ones which it happens suddenly as well with like heart attacks. But with this, it was just something totally like out of the blue. Nobody knew what it was. We never knew. We never had no warning signs of what it is and what it causes and what damages it does. So we never had time to prepare what it was, and it was just so, you know, yeah, it's really,
yeah.
yeah.
So, what would you like to tell people um, about, or maybe advise people out there when it comes to losing a loved one so suddenly? Um, Anything special you would like to say? I mean,
Um, I mean, when it's sudden, obviously it's going to hit you no matter who you are. You know, it will hit people. Obviously, people accept things in different ways. Some people, they can deal with it. They carry on, and then there's obviously people like me, and that obviously already suffers with mental health. And obviously, when you get things like that, it's the trauma's worse. But if you've got a partner or somebody that's got these sort of either diabetes or things like that, get insurance. Don't leave it. Don't sit there going, "Oh, I'll do it next month. I'll do it. I'll leave it." Don't do it, because believe me, it's the best thing you can do, because it's a struggle if you don't, as I've known, and I've struggled for the last 3 years, and it's not nice to deal with. Really isn't nice to deal with. At least if you've got that, you've got some sort of plan, some sort of support to help you for the aftermath of it. And, you know, And when you do lose someone suddenly, don't sit there, don't keep quiet, reach out, because there's people out there that can help you, you can talk to, because if you don't, it gets to a point where you will just get yourself into deeper and deeper and deeper dark in the place like I did at first. If I hadn't have
So
met
there's
you,
one
you know.
thing that you did too, which helped you with your whole grieving process. So what's the one good thing that came out of it?
My page on Instagram. My Jason Begay page, because that's how I met you. And that's how I met so many other beautiful people that I've made friends with. Um, I did this page on my idol because I was so frustrated and so angry, and I used to just do edits, and then I'll put these little fancy quotes with the pictures, you know, because it was how I was feeling day to day, and that's the only way I could express it, by posting his pictures with certain edits, and it helped me, you know, because it was something that I enjoyed doing, and it made me smile. And as I said, I would never have met you and many others if it was not through that page. Because
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd be doing if I didn't have that page now.
How many followers do you have nowadays?
Uh, 35K now.
Well,
Yeah,
kudos.
yeah,
A little over a
yeah,
year and a half now, I think.
yeah, year and a half. Yeah, it'd be 2 years in August. I would
Yeah.
have had the page.
And that's,
Uh,
I think, maybe something to end with on a positive note, that even through these really hard times, some good things can come out of it.
oh,
But
definitely. Yeah,
it does require you speaking up. If you hadn't started that page and
I
shared
would
how you
never
had
have spoken
felt,
up. Yeah, I would never have spoken up. I would never have been. I would never have said or done the things on live, anything like that, if I hadn't have met you and done all that. Because
yeah, but I
I
meant
would
if you
never.
even hadn't started that page, and
Mm,
I mean, you started with actually getting that page out there, getting those pictures out there, but more
mm.
importantly, you started sharing your thoughts, and you did that prior to knowing me, and
Yeah,
that's
and
I think
you
that's
sort of
one.
twigged on. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you
I
obviously
picked up on
knew.
it.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
it's
I think
helped.
it's one of those things which is very important for people to know, that when you feel lost, uh, and I mean, you actually have a support group of other widows, right?
Yep, yep. There's my friend Sally done a page called Widows for COVID, like lost COVID, like widowers. And I met 5 amazing women: Sally, Sue, Maureen, Connie, and Helen. We call ourselves the witches of COVID.
Yeah. So hopefully
Yeah,
tomorrow we get to talk to one
yeah.
of them,
Yep, Sally,
besides
dear
you.
Sally, yes. Yeah, you get to speak to Sally and she can give you a rundown of how her life's been, because she's
Yeah.
obviously had a lot of struggles as well. So, you know, and it's nice for her, be nice for her to share her experience with everyone as well, you know, what it's like losing a loved one to COVID. And she'd only been married 4 months
Yeah.
when she lost
Yeah. At
her
least you
husband,
had
you
a
know.
good time,
Yeah,
long time
she had
with
literally
Keith.
4 months. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Um,
again, it's and I don't believe that a lot of people are aware of the consequences of someone dying all of a sudden. And of course, people can say, yeah, but always people always die. There are
mm,
always people dying all of a sudden. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
life. Um, but, a lot of people, they just dismissed COVID so
Mm,
easily. And well, your daughter actually, she shared a few times over the years things about COVID. and
Yeah.
how it impacted her losing her dad. And I think she recently shared something about
Oh, it's
thinking that the
beautiful.
nightmare
Yeah,
would
so
never end.
beautiful. Yeah,
But apparently, what I noticed was that she's actually wrote about it like she thought it would never end. So apparently, there's a
yeah,
change.
yeah. There is a chance. Yeah, slowly getting there. Yeah, she's doing so much better. She's getting a bit more positive every day, which is good.
Yeah,
So
because I do remember that she was very depressed at
yeah,
some point.
yeah, yeah. Very.
And that's so if I want to share one message with the people who are watching, and this doesn't necessarily apply to people who have lost loved ones due to COVID, but also those who have all of a sudden lost their loved ones, please take care of the people, because they probably don't know what to do, and especially when there are children involved,
Yeah,
take especially good care. Don't say it needs to be over and done with within a month or within half a year or within a year, because the pain never really goes away.
no.
But be there, be supportive,
Yeah, be
and
supportive and yeah,
I guess
definitely.
that having you, you were able to talk about it numerous times, and I
Mm.
do believe that has helped you too.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started talking, I'd be crying my eyes out. I'd be like, oh, blah 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 blah. Blah. But now, I mean, I can sort of talk more about him now and not get upset, not cry. I can actually enjoy talking about him, on the good side. So, but yeah, but definitely anyone loses anybody, whether it's sudden or not, reach out, don't suffer alone. You must reach out and talk, speak up, speak out.
Yeah. So hopefully tomorrow we'll be there again. This
Yep,
time with Sally to share a little things about how it was, what it was like for her
yep.
unexpectedly, and how she's doing right now. To give
Hmm.
us a little update on 3 years of COVID and how this impacted the loved ones who have lost their loved ones. Thank you so much, Joe, for being here
Thank
and
you
sharing
for
your
inviting me.
story, being so open about it. And we're looking forward to seeing you again, but then
Yep,
on a different topic.
yeah, definitely. Bye bye.
It's still finishing
It's
up.
still live.
And let's do this differently.